Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
We'll talk coronavirus, oil prices, and much more when one of the state's leading economists, Dr. Loren joins us on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Louisiana businesses, by partnering with your local community and technical college foundation, you're guaranteed a skilled, highly competent workforce, homegrown talent, trained specifically to meet your needs, whatever those needs are. Visit this website to learn more about how to partner with your local Louisiana Community and Technical College Foundation. To better prepare for tomorrow, become a partner today.
At Optimal, we understand what's at stake during your projects. That's why we value integrity, trust, and expertise. We retain proven and experienced craftsmen, and with multiple locations, we can execute hundreds of customized project solutions across the country, so you stay ahead of schedule and under budget. At Optimal, you come first, plain and simple. We have your back, and we always deliver. Experience the Optimal difference.
Are you a licensed contractor? There's lots of good contractors in Louisiana doing work the right way, but unfortunately, too many unlicensed contractors are working outside the licensing requirements. Working as a contractor in Louisiana requires a license for the company doing the work. The Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors wants to help you get licensed to allow you to conduct work legally. It's not difficult to get the license. We can help you. Go to lacontractor.org for more information. Licensed contractors, it's the law.
For 8 seconds in the arena before an afternoon in the field. For a promise to students that honors success in the classroom. For championships earned on the bayou. For innovators committed to reclaiming our coastline. The Universities of Louisiana. For your future. For our future.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Very pleased to be joined for the third time in the history of our show, economics extraordinaire, Dr. Loren Scott. How are you, brother?
I'm doing great. How about your own self?
I am well, and given all that is going on in the world and in the Gulf Coast, we've got a lot to talk about. So let's start to unpack it. As we tape this, Loren, because of scheduling, we are a week away from when it will actually air. So things can change because things are changing quickly relative to COVID-19, coronavirus, and all of these different things. But here we are a week or so into this, what is now being called a pandemic, and it is having significant impact. Schools are closing. Businesses are shutting down. Athletic events are being canceled. Let's talk first, though, pre-virus scare. What were the fundamentals of the U.S. economy going into this?
Well, going into it, the fundamentals were good. I mean, the national economy, if you look at the forecast, everybody was forecasting growth rates well in excess of 2%. Matter of fact, they would have gone up even more if there was even more work done on the Chinese deal with the trade thing. The trade thing was really holding things back a bit. But still, the fundamentals of the economy were very good. And if you looked at the people who were talking about making forecasts, they were saying, gee, unless there is some, what we economists call exogenous event, we should continue to grow all the way through 2021. So fundamentally, the U.S. economy is in great shape.
And that was reflected certainly in the stock market. But since this scare has been announced and it has moved forward, the Dow has lost a significant percentage of its value. Now, we don't know how it might bounce back between the time we are taping here and this show actually airs, but it's down significantly, and it is having this sort of ripple impact across the economy. So let's talk now about the economy where you see it today post-virus scare.
Well, if you think about real gross domestic product, something we learned in our principles class, you think of this big pie that represents real gross domestic product. The different slices of that pie are really getting hammered right now. The biggest part of that pie, 2/3 of it, is personal consumption spending. When we go out and we buy a car, we buy groceries, movie ticket, et cetera, that's the biggest part of that pie. Well, people spend based on their income and their net worth. Well, as you mentioned just a while ago, their net worth is taking a hit right now. So a lot of people are grabbing hold of their billfold and hanging on to it, and they're not going to spend for a while till this thing is cleared up. So much uncertainty out there, and in the face of uncertainty, you don't spend. The other significant part of that pie is business investment spending, which was already kind of lackluster because of the trade issues, supply chain issues and things like that. It was already not growing. Well, now uncertainty is the bane of economic investment, as we were talking about before the show. It's going to squeeze that piece of the pie down. And then there's a piece of the pie called net exports. Well, because of problems in China and Europe and all of our trading partners in Asia said our exports are starting to decline. Well, again, that's a piece of the pie that's starting to squeeze down. The only piece of pie that might grow is government spending, and that has long-run consequences that we're not going to like very much.
So, if I ask you to look into your crystal ball, and I know that economists do make forecasts, but given the situation that we're in, I know it's probably difficult to do. But let's assume that this thing goes on for another 6 weeks or so. What's the bottom look like?
Well, I think if it goes on for 6 weeks, that would be wonderful. If you look at some work done by McKinsey, their best case scenario is this sucker ending by early June.
Really?
That's the best case scenario. Next, most likely case is into July. Worst case, of course, is going all year long. So let's suppose that it goes on into July, then we're going to have a really bad second quarter numbers. When the second quarter numbers came out for real gross domestic products, will be way down. It's going to be way down because people are not spending, again, for all the reasons we just talked about. Until this thing goes away, or we feel like it's got it under control, until we start doing things again, holding events again, this is just going to be a problem for some time. Economists are doing their very best to forecast, but we're economists, not doctors. And this is a doctor thing. And so, we're just kind of hoping that the best case scenario happens and this will be over by June. If it's over by June, by the way, that doesn't solve all of Louisiana's problem, because Louisiana's got another problem.
And I want to get into that a little bit later, but in the time we have left in this segment, if Loren Scott were president of the United States, if Loren Scott were the chief economist of the U.S., and you said you had authority to implement either tax cuts or other stimulus kinds of ideas, what would you do?
Well, I would keep, because of the nature of the kind of economist I am, I'm a very conservative economist, I would be very worried about doing something really, really big, like free family leave for everybody paid by the government, or no Social Security taxes for the rest of the year, which sounds good and is going to be helpful, but it's going to have a mother of an impact on the deficit. And after a while, the deficit starts to really matter when you do really big things like that. So I'm not really sure what I would do at this point. I would probably have a tendency to want to wait just a little bit more. Again, this show is being aired 2 weeks after you and I have talked, so I would probably want to wait just a little bit and see how bad this is going to be, and then do something. Yeah,
kind of let this begin to shake out a little bit and then make some decisions. I know the Trump administration has talked about some short-term tax cuts and some other things that might be potential. We'll have to wait to see what happens. And as you mentioned, between the time, the week between the time we are taping today and this show actually airs, that's a lifetime of things that could happen. Let's take a break. I want to come back. I want to get into Louisiana's economy, because not only is this virus having an impact on what might take place in our economy, oil price declines, other things that are taking place, creating uncertainty that is the bane of investment. We're visiting with Dr. Loren Scott. He's one of our state's leading economists, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Since 1919, we've designed and constructed hundreds of industrial plants, roads, ships, dams, and executed some of the most complex jobs in the world. In fact, our quality and dependability are legendary. Today, the legend continues as Brown & Root delivers engineering, construction, maintenance, and industrial specialty services throughout the U.S. and the world from our headquarters here in Louisiana. We are Brown & Root.
Welcome to Southwest Louisiana. 5 parishes working hand in hand to provide economic development, opportunity, and quality of life. $43 billion in projects underway, $65 billion in the pipeline, 18,000 construction workers, and 18,000 permanent jobs. It's all here. Welcome to Opportunity, the Southwest Louisiana Alliance.
Louisiana businesses, by partnering with your local community and technical college foundation, you're guaranteed a skilled, highly competent workforce, homegrown talent, trained specifically to meet your needs, whatever those needs are. Visit this website to learn more about how to partner with your local Louisiana Community and Technical College Foundation. To better prepare for tomorrow, become a partner today.
ExxonMobil Baton Rouge keeps the local economy rolling. Our new aviation project created hundreds of jobs, drove millions of dollars to local businesses, and poured thousands more into our community to improve schools. 1 in 8 jobs in our parish can be traced back to ExxonMobil. Tomorrow's Baton Rouge is built by what we do today. A little energy goes a long way. ExxonMobil Baton Rouge. Energy lives here.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Dr. Loren Scott, economist, is our guest. We talked about the coronavirus and its impact on the federal economy, the U.S. economy in the first segment, Loren. Let's talk about Louisiana. I want to start with the virus's potential impact and what we're seeing relative to our state. But there's so much more that is impacting Louisiana's economy and quite frankly has been holding it back in terms of how we compare to the rest of the country. But let's, as we said, the coronavirus impact on Louisiana and what you're seeing.
Well, certainly it depends on the sector of the economy, but certain sectors are just getting hammered. Anybody in the hospitality industry, anybody in the airline industry, anybody in the tourism industry, which tells you right away that it's going to hit New Orleans particularly hard. You know, that particular aspect is going to hit New Orleans much harder than it is Shreveport, for example, where tourism is less of an impact. But I mean, the athletic events alone, if you think about the impact on athletic budgets at all these universities around the state, and look at the LSU's, I mean, you're giving up the TV revenue, you're giving up people in attendance revenue. Now, that's the bad side. The good side is there are a bunch of coaches that might have gotten some big bonuses if by going and winning the NCAA or going to Omaha, they're not going to have to pay that. I assume they're not going to have to, but it's going to be a net hit to them. But the hospitality industry is particularly hard.
My sister happens to be, Jill Kidder, happens to be the executive director of the Louisiana Travel Association, and conversations with her, you know, they're concerned about the industry and all of the owners of the individual businesses. They're particularly concerned about the hourly employees who work in that industry. You know, there are a lot of salaried folks that somehow may maintain some part of their income as we go through this process. But these hourly folks and some of the folks on the lower end of our economic spectrum in our state are really going to suffer. I know you see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're going to see that. Now, there are some safety nets out there for folks like that. There's unemployment insurance that'll cover some of them. There are other, you know, there are food stamps. There is a safety net out there to try to help through this. But it's not going to. Those safety nets are always smaller than the actual salary, so it's going to be particularly tough. And if you think about any kind of restaurant or anything near an academic institution, like you think about walk-ons.
Right.
Walk-ons we're all familiar with right there next to LSU. I just can't imagine what they're going through right now. They're all losing all the students, losing all the athletic events. That's just got to be a real hammer for them.
And you think about these television outlets and other things. I mean, you listening to ESPN radio here in Baton Rouge, and part of what they're going to have to decide is what are they going to cover over the course of the next couple of months when there are no live sporting events to think about. You think about an organization as large as ESPN corporate. And what are they going to do with all of their platforms to fill the time? There are so many implications to this thing that go deep and wide. I'm not sure we even know them all.
Well, yet. I think we're going to see a lot of reruns of old Masters events. You know, the old Masters, not this year's Masters. The idea that we're not going to have a Masters is just mind-boggling. Just that alone. I'm a golfer, so I just can't imagine that.
Think
but that's one of the Weird things that we have to do in order to stop this sucker.
Well, you think about conversations with business people and you say, well, is this whole thing being overblown? I don't know that we know that, but you certainly can't take a chance that it's not being overblown,
well,
right?
Certainly,
and put people in harm's
certainly
way.
That's the attitude of government. Right. I mean, if you're in government right now, whether you're a mayor, you're a governor, or you're the president of the United States, you're under a lot of pressure to do something, okay? And they're doing something, unlike any other event we've ever been through before. I've never seen anything like this ever, and I've been watching the U.S. economy for 40 years. Nothing like this.
Even prior to the coronavirus scare, for a number of reasons that we have talked about on this show for a long, long time, and that you and I have talked about both on this show and the radio version of the program, Louisiana's economy has been lagging behind. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of factors to that.
Right.
On top of that now, on top of the coronavirus scare and the impact that that is having, we've seen oil prices drop significantly in the last couple of weeks, which has a major impact on Louisiana's economy in a number of ways, both to state budgets and to overall operating entities in the state. Give us a big picture overview on the oil price side of this thing and the impact that that's having, Loren.
Well, again, before the coronavirus, kind of like before for the national economy is doing pretty well. Oil prices are doing pretty darn well too. They actually crept into the $60 range, or $60 plus range. And then you had two things happen. The first big thing was the coronavirus. It cut down on the demand for oil, and that demand for oil dropped the price. That demand dropped the price of oil somewhere down to mid 40s. And then you had a meeting of OPEC and Russia, what we call the OPEC plus one. Group. That group had been keeping the price of oil popped up by taking about 1.6 million barrels of oil a day off the market. And so they got together and said, well, OPEC said, we need to take even more off the market in order to get the price back up at the 60s. And Russia said, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to lose market share of the U.S. shale producers. We need to kill those suckers. So they didn't agree. So the Saudis said, well, you don't agree? Let me show you what's going to happen. So they pumped a bunch of oil on the market instead of taking it off, dropped the price down to the low 30s, right? To the low 30s. Now the question for us is, how long is that going to last? Okay, and I think it's not going to last very long. I think they're going to solve this problem fairly quickly. And the reason for that is because an economist would say the demand curve is very inelastic for oil. It's very steep. And what that technically means is when the price of oil declines, their money, their treasury declines, and it declines fast. It declines a lot. And so Russia here has got these two headwinds. It's looking. This is one of the few sources of currency they have is their oil monies, and they're seeing that starting to dry up and go down and down and down. They're not going to be able to keep that up very long. The Saudis are seeing the same thing. They're not going to keep that going down, down, down for very long. So I think relatively soon, hopefully by the end of April, they're going to get together and say, all right, King's X, let's take oil off the market, and hopefully that'll happen by the end of April. That's a big uncertainty, just like the coronavirus. But if it does, then we're going to see the price of oil pop back up and pop back up smartly.
Well, we have to hope that it recovers and recovers quickly. Let's take a break. We come back. I want to talk about some of the other really important factors that have held Louisiana's economy back, because I think that you have some real insight there and some things that you've been talking about for quite a long time. We're visiting with Dr. Loren Scott, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Tim Johnson here for the Louisiana Energy Export Association. LEA members are investing more than $60 billion in Louisiana's economy, creating more than 1,500 permanent jobs and 20,000 construction jobs. Louisiana is a global leader in energy export, and LEA is the voice of that industry. Check them out on their website to learn more.
For more than 20 years, the TJC Group has been helping companies assess their training needs and to develop programs that improve the effectiveness and productivity of their teams.
Training doesn't have to be expensive or complicated. Let us put our experience and expertise to work for you.
The TJC Group, facilitating solutions for business and industry.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Good conversation, important conversation with Dr. Loren Scott, one of our state's leading economists. Loren, let's finish up on this oil price discussion and how it's impacting Louisiana, because you talked about the demand curve and the steepness and our hope that maybe it rebounds relatively quickly. But you think about places like Houma and Lafayette and New Iberia that have already been devastated by the drops that we saw in oil prices over the course of the last few years. What does it mean for those places?
Well, I think it's really tough, especially for Houma. And Houma had already lost about 20% of their jobs. I mean, it's a huge hit to them from the drop in oil prices that took place in 2014, 2015. And what we're at, we're just about to a point where the rig count in the Gulf of Mexico was about to start going up. And certainly having an oil price in the $60 barrel range was very good for that. You look at lease sales in the Gulf of Mexico, you look at some forecasts that other firms have for what we're expecting a nice uptick. Now I'm not so sure that that's going to happen. Well, there's been some technological advances. We can now drill and produce and oil fields that have pressure on the bottom of the water, 20,000 pounds per square inch, just something unbelievable to me. There's some real breakthroughs that we're really going to cause it to turn around, and then this happens. You know, this is just sets them back again. But I mean, that's the nature of an industry, of an economy that's based heavily on the oil and gas side. You just move up and down the price of oil.
And I know, you know, even for the state budget, what every dollar drop in the price of oil means to the revenues of the state. But let's talk about some other factors in Louisiana's economy. Recent conversation with some folks in the industrial construction and maintenance segment, and conversations across a number of companies. And what is common for these firms is that they are much more optimistic about their Texas operations, particularly their Houston operations, than they are about their Louisiana operations and their Baton Rouge operations. That's something you have been seeing and talking about for quite some time. Your thoughts?
Well, number one, if you just look kind of an anecdotal case, I mean, Exxon said they were going to invest $20 billion in the Gulf Coast. We got $500 million of that.
Yeah.
Everything else basically went to Texas. Well, that ought to tell you something. That ought to raise alert signs. I mean, we rank way below Texas in the tort area. Matter of fact, we rank 51st. We're even below District of
We are
Columbia.
the most litigious state in America.
In America, as it turns out. Our infrastructure is worse than Texas. Higher ed is ranked higher. K through 12 is ranked higher. General business climate is ranked higher in Texas.
They have more certainty around their incentive programs.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. And the only way we could possibly overcome that partially is through the industrial tax exemption program. Then we screwed that up. We introduced uncertainty into that. Now, the good news is the governor has backed off on this some. He's backed off twice now, and I think this is a good move, where now really the commerce and industry has the final decision. That's going to help a lot. But this has not been a good time period for businesses. For Louisiana, when it comes to deciding, do you invest here or do you invest in Texas? Because this really comes down to a matter of math. You're figuring the rate of return on equity, Texas versus Louisiana, and these 5 things that you and I talked about just drive the ROI up there, and the uncertainty about the ITEP here has driven it down here. It just put us in a very bad spot.
Because we have put ourselves behind the 8 ball, particularly as it relates to our competition with Texas, even if we were to begin to get our political and governmental house in order, if we were begin to getting our litigiousness under control, there's some tort reform measures before the legislature as we sit here and speak today. How long do you believe it might take, if ever, in terms of our ability to once again compete head-to-head with the state of Texas?
There are 5 things, right? I mean, you talked about tort. We can fix tort. We'll just have the the backbone to do that, okay? We can fix tort. The other ones are a little more difficult to handle. But again, I think if we get the ITEP solidly fixed, in fact, I wish it would go back the way it was, okay? There are all kinds of arguments. One might argue that local government should have the final say. But the bottom line is we don't have that luxury here, not with these other things staring us in the face. So I think we really need to solidify that, and we need to take care of the tort. We do that, it's still going to be a while, but at least there's a lot going on here. The price of natural gas is so low here relative to Europe that firms are moving from Europe and they're moving from Asia to here to take advantage of that. And what we want to do is that's going to continue to happen for some time now because we have an ocean of natural gas in this country. If we can just make some of these changes, we'll at least get a bigger share than we've been getting for the last couple of years.
We talked about fundamentals in the U.S. economy in the first segment, and I'm almost tired of saying it on this television show. The fundamentals, the things that occur here naturally, put us in a position that we ought to be able to compete with any place in the world if we get these other factors corrected, and we'll get them lined out. We've got about a minute and a half left in the show, so I want to talk about the future. We've talked about how you might forecast, what your crystal ball might say for the federal economy. Let's assume that we can get some things done in tort reform with this new legislature and the governor's willingness to listen maybe and compromise some there. What are we looking at? What do you foresee over the next 18 months and then into your crystal ball 5 years from now?
Oh gosh, that's really hard now, mainly because the uncertainties about the coronavirus and the uncertainties about the price of oil. If everything gets solved by June or July, then I think once we get into the second half of the year, and if we get tort reform right in the middle of all that too, I think if we get those things, you're going to start seeing the economy start to pop back because there's some real fundamentally good things going on, not only in the national economy, but in the Louisiana economy too. We had the Louisiana economy growing pretty smartly over the next 2 years, passing 2 million people employed for the first time in our history on an annualized basis. So I think things are looking pretty good.
10 seconds, your message to Louisiana's business community.
Be strong. This too will pass.
Yeah.
I hope.
That's right.
And I hope very soon.
While it seems like pretty dark days today, that we generally do rebound. Dr. Loren Scott, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I appreciate your insight, I appreciate your leadership, and I appreciate the way you communicate these messages to our state.
Well, thank you very much. Enjoyed it.
That's a wrap, guys. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.